There is literally hundreds of YouTube videos talking about how to launch a t-shirt line or how to start a clothing company. And they'll tell you what's the best brands to use when buying blanks or how to start your website to launch that first line on there. Before you run out there and buy any fabric or even build a website, hold up. There's some things that they're not telling you that you need to know. And if you're curious to know what those things are, stay tuned. I'm going to talk about that next here on Making the Brand. What's up, everybody? I am Rob Norman, and on this episode of Making the Brand, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the things you need to know before you launch that clothing line or even start a clothing company. There's some fundamental things you need to know before you get started that's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money in the long run if you do these things before you start. But first, hit that subscribe and like button so you can get all the updates on when I'm dropping new videos. You want to stay in the loop, so make sure you hit those buttons. Now, before I even get into talking about these key things you should think about before starting a company, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. Because like I said, there are hundreds of videos on YouTube talking about this subject. But the thing is, why should you listen to me besides listen to anybody else on YouTube? Well, I have 20 years plus in the fashion industry. I got my degree in graphic design, and when I started off out of school doing graphic design, I realized I didn't need to limit myself to just designing on paper or designing on a computer. Fabric was another option, so I decided to start a t-shirt company about 2 years after I graduated out of college. But I was also working in advertising design, and what I realized was that if I really wanted to do this fashion thing, I needed to get into fashion. So I started freelancing and working in fashion. So I started doing graphics for different companies. I was working with Perry Ellis. I was working with Reebok. I did stuff for Russell Simmons' clothing line, Fat Farm at the time, and a host of other companies I started working with. And while I was designing with them, I had the opportunity to really look at how fashion worked. So I started working in the departments with a lot of the product developers. I actually had the opportunity while working with these companies to learn a lot about how fashion really worked, what the inner workings were like. So I had time to sit with production and saw how they actually produce a garment from concept to finish. I went to factories to actually see how t-shirt printing worked. I saw there was more than just silk screening. I saw that there was different techniques like lenticular and high dense printing. And this gave me an opportunity to really gain knowledge and help myself as developing my brand by doing it with other people's brands. So I got to see all the processes that went into it. I eventually put my clothing line on hold and just continued working in fashion. And I moved on from working with independent lines to working with big box stores. Now, if you're familiar with what big box stores are, they are brands like Walmart, Kohl's, JCPenney's. Those type of brands, they all license out their private labels to other companies to design. So I actually started working with these independent companies designing these private labels for these big box stores. Some of the brands I ended up working with was like P. Miller, which was Masterpiece clothing line. I also did his son's Romeo's line, which was Shorty's. I designed Tony Hawk line, which I believe was for Kohl's, if I'm correct. I worked on that. And a host of other little brands, Izod, Sean John, Fubu, things like that. I had the opportunity to really design, and I saw how this worked on a larger scale. I eventually pitched the concept to one of my companies, to the owners. I pitched the concept to do a streetwear line, and they signed me to a deal. So I started my first clothing line with a bigger company, actually now having knowledge. I put my own clothing line on hiatus just to focus on this new brand I created. So I started one with one company, did it for about 2 years, and then after that, I went on and started another streetwear company with another company. Eventually, I grew tired, and understanding how corporate worked, I now saw that I kind of wanted to go back to just doing it independently, because when you're in corporate, you start to see that there are other players involved, and a lot of times the vision you have for your brand isn't the same vision other people involved with it have. And sometimes what you want, you don't get. So going back to basics is what I did. And I went back and started my brand again that I launched, which was called Planet Brooklyn Academy. I relaunched it in 2010. And from 2010, I just worked on it, and we opened a store, and that's what I've been doing since. And we've had the opportunity to do a lot of great collabs with a lot of great companies. I am based out of New York City. So we had a great opportunity to work with brands like Hot 97. We worked with the Breakfast Club on Power 105. Our latest project was working with the Brooklyn Nets for the 2019-2020 season. We designed a capsule with them, which was sold strictly inside of the Brooklyn Nets stadium. And we also designed the Brooklyn Nets dancers uniforms for the 2019-2020 season. They were actually shown in the NBA All-Star Weekend for 2020. They were the featured dance troupe for that weekend, and their uniforms that they wore, we designed under my label. And even with the pandemic, we've been able to sustain and keep doing business. Now, not just doing all of this since 2010, I'm also a college professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I teach product development for fashion. So you can best believe that when I speak and I tell you what to do and how to do it, you're getting experience. It's not, I'm not some guy that just started a t-shirt out of his garage and, I've been doing it for a year and these are my ups and downs, which are good things to know, but I'm telling you now that I started off that way, but I've also been in the industry for 20 plus years. So my information is, good information. I'm not leading you wrong. This isn't something that is just like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I've been there, lived it. I know what it's like. So this is why I'm doing it, because I want to share this information with you guys, because I think it's something that people should know, that if you're going to start a clothing company, it's not just running out there and just throwing your money into something without knowing what it really takes to build a real brand. And that's a perfect segue into discussing for a lot of you who start brands. And the first thing is that a lot of you out there, and I am at fault of saying this too, we all like to say we have a clothing brand, which I actually do have a clothing brand. But most of the people out there, and many of you watching this video, do not have clothing brands. You have clothing lines. There's a difference between a clothing line and a clothing brand. It's just easier to say that you have a clothing company than saying you have a clothing brand. The difference is that when you have a brand, let's take for example, Nike. Nike is a clothing brand, and under them, they have lines. And one of the particular lines they have is, let's say, Air Max. And they have Air Max 1, Air Max 95, Air Max 97. Those are all lines under the Nike brand. So it is still Nike, but it's Air Max. But then Nike also has ACG. That's another line under Nike. So Nike has multiple lines under their brand, which is their umbrella. Most of you starting clothing lines just have that one t-shirt line. So if you have a t-shirt line called Brand X and all your shirts say Brand X, you are a clothing line. You're not a brand. You're just a line. Or you can be called a clothing company. Now, as I said, I am guilty of calling people's brands, their company's brands when they actually aren't brands. And it's become kind of just an industry thing of people just naturally saying brands. But just to let you know that it's fine to call it a brand. You will hear me at times say, this brand, that brand, when they really aren't brands. But just know that the true definition of a brand is what I just said, and that what you have isn't one. So as long as you understand that, even if you call it a brand, just understand the differentiation between what a brand and a clothing line is. Now, when you are working on your clothing line or launching that t-shirt line, what you need to know first before you even buy fabric, before you build a website, you need to know who your target audience is. Knowing your target audience is going to save you a lot of headaches down the line, because if you just figure that, hey, I want to do a t-shirt and my friends think it's great, so this is why I'm doing it, you can go into the market believing that, but after a year, you may realize that, well, I'm not getting sales the way I thought I was going to get sales, because just because my friends bought it, I assumed I was going to do great. And that's because you didn't look at your target audience, because a lot of times people in your circle are going to like your stuff, but the people in your circle are not going to be honest to you as far as to say that they are truly your target market. They're not buying every shirt you have. If you have 24 shirts, they're not going to buy all 24 shirts. You may have two friends and they'll buy a shirt a piece, but who's going to buy the rest of those shirts? So you need to find who is your target audience, because you may think that if you're doing, your shirt and you think that all guys are going to love your shirts and you put it out there, you may end up finding out that more women actually like your shirts than men. So you need to realize, is this my target audience? So you have to test market it. You need to find out who's your target audience. What's their age range? Because the graphics you're doing, you may think that, an older crowd may like it, but it may actually appeal to a much younger demographic. So you need to know who your target market is, what's their age, where do they shop, what do they like. You want to cater, because when you start building websites and you have to do Facebook ads and things like that, it's going to ask you, who's your target market? Do they play video games? Do they listen to music? What type of music they listen to? All that is important, especially building a brand, because if you do that now, and notice I just said brand, when you start doing this, it will help you, because you want to do this now and get this straight before you spend a year doing this and then realizing you've been marketing to the wrong person and now you got to spend money to correct your errors. So make sure you focus on who your target audience is. Now, the next thing you need to think about is, who is my competitor? Now, some people out there will be like, well, I just created this, I have no competitor. Wrong. Everybody has a competitor. There's no one out there without any competition. Trust me, the wheel has been created. No one's going to make a new wheel. You can dress up a wheel, make it look different, but the wheel is the wheel. No one's ever going to remake the wheel. So you're not going to create something that's never been done before. You may not have seen it before, but trust me, it exists somewhere. The only thing is that you need to figure out in your particular area or arena that you're trying to sell your garment in, is that no one else is doing it. And if someone else is, how can you be better at that? So this is where you have to find out what your competition is. Now, when you look at competition, another thing you need to think about is, it doesn't matter if they're a big company or a little company. The idea is that they're also selling what you're selling. So if you're a young company and you're just starting out of your garage and you say, well, my competitor is Supreme, that's fine. You may not be at a Supreme level, but they are still your competitor. And you need to look at that. So when you're looking at competitors, you need to look at a host of them. And it's normally more than one. Normally there's 2, 3, maybe even 4 companies that rival what you're doing. When you look at your competitors, you're looking at key things about them. So let's just say, for example, company A is selling t-shirts at $50 and they're a big company and they're well known. And company B is selling their t-shirts at $25 and they're also a well-known company. But you are in the middle. These are your competitors. This is giving you an opportunity to find your sweet spot, because you know that if company A is selling their shirts at $50 and you're not at that level yet, and you know no one's going to pay $50 for a shirt like yours, but you know that your shirt quality is worth more than selling it at $25, then you need to find the sweet spot. Somewhere in the middle that you know that it's still a good price point for you, and eventually you can go up, and you're at least not too low that makes you look cheap. So now you know that your competitor A is at 50, competitor B is at 25, so you may want to come in at, say, 30, even $35. Sweet spot, because now they know that I'm looking at, as a consumer, I'm looking at all 3 brands, yourself, brand A, and brand B, and I'm going, well, yeah, Supreme is great if they're playing A, and then whoever, Group B is, I'm saying, well, they're a great brand too, but they're a little too cheap. But this new one I like, because one, they're right in the middle, they're affordable, but their graphics are just as great, and their fabric is amazing. So now you're putting yourself on the same level as these brands, and people are looking at you as the same because you did the research of pricing. Now, also, when you're looking at who your competitors are, you're also looking at basically to see what are they missing, because every brand is missing something. And your key is that your job is that as a brand, you want to look and say, where is their error and how can I profit off of that? So if you look at brand A, you may say brand A is printing all their t-shirts in black and brand B is printing all their shirts in white. So what are they missing? Summer is coming and a lot of people want a bright color. So if you print your t-shirts in yellow, you've just opened up a market that these other two aren't catering to. So this is why market research is important, and this is why you need to know who your competitors are, and you have to constantly watch them, see what they're doing. Again, it doesn't matter if you're just selling to your neighborhood church or you're just selling into your city, wherever you're selling, it doesn't matter. Whoever the biggest company is to the smallest, whoever your competitor is, you need to make a list of them, you need to monitor them, you need to look at what they're doing to really understand where your brand fits so you can constantly change with them, because they're going to switch. And when they switch, you want to be able to pivot also just as fast to stay as a competitor, because you want them to eventually look at you and say, who's this brand? Again, I said brand. Who's this brand or company that's coming up that is suddenly gaining a lot of traction, and it's because you did your research. Again, you don't want to take your time and just go out there and say, oh, I'm gonna print some shirts, and yeah, I think my target market is this, and yeah, I think I got one competitor, I'm not really checking, because as you start to grow, you may start seeing growth, and then suddenly your growth stagnates. And why is that? You'll start asking yourself those questions. And when you look, you'll start seeing competitors coming out, and you're seeing what they're doing. You're like, I could have capitalized on that. This is why my brand is not growing at the time. So these are things you guys got to really think about as you guys are creating your clothing lines or even launching a t-shirt line. I'll go more into this in later episodes. And this is why it's called Making the Brand. Again, even though you guys don't have a brand, most of you, it is called Making the Brand, because I want to show you guys how to actually start establishing your lines the proper way, not just run out there, waste money, and then have to go back to the drawing board. I want to help you guys step by step actually build your companies the proper way. So until next time, take it easy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.